55. Inventory. Kate. Tiny black pebbles press into my cheek as the first raindrops hit me. My chest heaves. My body shivers with the cold. The arrival of the rain almost makes me sob. I swallow back the despair that presses at my gut. My people need me. I can't let them know how scared and worried I am. And just because I can't resist torturing myself, I look at my watch arm. It reads 12 hours. It's been 12 hours since the clock started ticking on Fort Ross. Even though we technically just traveled 4 miles closer to Alvarez and his people, I don't feel any further along. In fact, knowing more miles of the lost coast lie before us makes me feel like crying all over again. "Keep it together," I scold myself. "Lives depend on you." Sometime during our frantic flight across the impassable zone, fog has boiled up. Sea spray and rain clouds turn the sky to dull gray. At least we'll have daylight to travel the remainder of the lost coast. It's the only positive thing I can find right now. It will have to be enough. I sit up, brushing sand off my soggy clothes. "Inventory!" My voice comes out as a croak. "Inventory!" "What?" Ash blinks up at me from where she's sprawled on the sand. Even wet and covered with bits of seaweed from our near-death experience, she still looks like a CrossFit model. "Inventory," I say again. "I need everyone's inventory." When everyone stares at me in confused silence, I realize I've slipped into running jargon. I mean, I need everyone to take stock of their bodies and report. Ash, you first. The list isn't pretty. There isn't a single one of us without some sort of wound. Ash has a bad scrape on one arm and a tender ankle. Susan's ankle is already swollen from her fall on the rocks. The gash on Caleb's thigh oozes blood. Eric has gashes on his face and hands. Reed took a header with a rock. Blood covers half his face. Ben's clothes are ripped in several places, blood seeping through. I have a scrape on my right hip, the jagged, bloody skin showing through. It could be worse, I tell myself, ignoring the despair that threatens to suck me under. There are no broken bones. None of us got swept out to sea. We're all alive. "Hey, look!" Caleb points. "One of the weapon packs." Sure enough, one of the weapon packs has washed onto shore. Ben limps up to the edge of the surf to retrieve it. "Everything is better when you have firepower." He drops the pack into the sand and drops down beside it. "Ash," I say, "do you still have your first aid kit?" "Affirmative." She pulls off her sodden running pack. "I don't know how much use everything inside will be." "Disinfectant on all the wounds," I say. Seawater carries a lot of bacteria. We could each use our own personal bottle of disinfectant and a lifetime supply of bandages, but we'll have to make do with what we have. If anyone needs stitches, see to it they get them. Susan, I'll wrap your ankle. I glance down the beach, at the black sand the lost coast is known for. "We move out in 30 minutes. "What?" Susan stares at me aghast. "We can't move out. None of us are in any shape to move." "None of us are in any shape to stay here," I reply. "We have no shelter and little food. We're wet and cold, and we can't build a fire in this rain. Any one of us could get an infection from our cuts and scrapes. Our best hope at surviving is to get the hell off the lost coast." "But my ankle," Susan begins. I cut her off, knowing how crucial it is to keep everyone in a suck-it-up mindset. I'll wrap it. The natural swelling will create a sheath to splint it. It's possible to run on it. Run! Susan's voice is a shriek. Mama ran almost 100 miles on a messed-up ankle, Reed puts in. You should have seen her when she arrived in Arcata. Her bad ankle was twice the size of her good one. Susan's face turns incredulous. Sympathy softens me, but I don't let it show. Pain isn't relevant, Susan. I know you hurt. I know you'll hurt more in the coming miles. But giving in to pain will get you killed. You can't stay out here. Your only option is to keep moving. A mix of frustration and fear flushes the angles of her face. I remind myself she's new to the running world. Until a few weeks ago, she didn't even know what ultra running was. I put a gentle hand on her arm. Trust me. Please. I'll get you out of here if you let me. She nods, lips compressed. I open my pack and pull out a soggy shirt. Using my knife, which miraculously is still attached to my belt, I cut off several strips and set about wrapping Susan's foot. Reed and Caleb both receive stitches from Ash. There aren't enough sterile wipes to go around, so I make sure those with the deepest wounds get them. I also wrap Ash's ankle with the remains of my shirt. Grateful hers doesn't look as purple and swollen as Susan's. During this time, I mentally plot out our next steps. The Lost Coast Trail is about 50 miles from north to south. According to Susan, we just exited the southern impassable zone. Judging on what I know of the route, I estimate we have about 30 miles left to travel. Due to the time of year, we'll have light for the next 2 or 3 hours. I hope everyone packed a headlamp. From what I recall reading about this next part of the trail, we will have a shit ton of climbing. I need to make sure I pace everyone accordingly. We have to move fast enough to get off the trail by sunset, but not so fast I blow everyone up by mile 12. With all of us wet and cold, hypothermia is a real threat. The rain is only a light drizzle, but there's no telling how long it will last, or if it will get worse. At least if we're moving, we have a chance at keeping our bodies warm. Once we're off the trail, we can find a house, a car, or some kind of shelter. We can scavenge food and medical supplies. We can regroup and figure out our next steps. I check my pack for the small tape recorder Johnny gave me with the Alpha command. It's in a 1-gallon Ziploc and appears to be intact. I don't dare take it out in this rain to check it. The recorder could possibly be the most valuable thing I have. I wrap it and the Ziploc in a pair of shorts, hoping to give it a little extra protection, then return it to my pack. I'm going to distribute the weapons, Ben says. That way, we don't risk losing everything in another disaster like we just had. Caleb nods in approval as Ash puts the finishing touch on his stitches. Ben distributes the various guns, rifles, explosives, and ammo. The rifles he brought are collapsible. It fits easily in my pack with the tape recorder and water bladder. Who would have thought I'd ever run down a trail with a rifle in my pack? I wish Frederico were here to see this. Everyone, pull out any food you have, I say. I need to know exactly what we have so I can ration. That includes water. Neither Ben nor Caleb have water or running packs, which means the rest of us will have to share. I don't want to risk drinking from streams unless we have no other choice. 2 minutes later, I stare at the pathetic pile of food at my feet. 2 cans of black beans, 7 granola bars, a bag of M&Ms, 2 sticks of beef jerky, 10 liters of water to share among 5 people over 30 miles. This is not good. We eat the beans now, ration the rest for today's journey. We eat every 2 hours, small bites only. How are we supposed to go 30 miles on that? Susan gestures to the pathetic pile of food. I share her sentiments, but I don't let it show. No one can know how worried I really am. It will have to be enough, I tell her. It's all we have. We've trained for this, Eric says. We can do this. You've trained for this, Susan snaps. I've only been running with you guys for 7 weeks. Couch potato to ultramarathon, I reply, trying to make my voice light. I knew people who specialized in that sort of training. Couch potato training? Ash asks. What does that mean? It means they don't train enough. Sometimes because they're lazy, but usually because life got in the way. So these couch potatoes still showed up to run on race day? Reed asks. I nod. It wasn't always pretty, but people can gut out just about anything if they put their mind to it. Besides, I add to Susan, you're in better shape than you give yourself credit for. You and Gary survived for months on the Fairhaven. You can't tell me ship life was easy. Susan weighs my words. It is hard work, she says after a moment. There you go. Just think of it as cross-training for the Lost Coast. She closes her eyes, a small smile wrinkling her mouth. You are the strangest woman I've ever met. I can't believe I actually feel inspired by what you just said. No one cross-trains on a charter boat for ultramarathons. They do now. I refuse to back away from the sliver of optimism I've managed to instill in her. You can start a new fad. Johnny will write about it in his book, Eric adds. Couch potato charter woman to ultramarathon runner. Everyone looks at him. Yeah, that sounded weird, didn't it? I think I just found another bear print. Reed stands in the sand, staring at something directly at his feet. I head toward him, my heart sinking at the large animal print filling up with rainwater. Leading away from Reed into a narrow canyon is a line of identical tracks. It's even larger than the last one we saw, these easily 5 inches across. Black bear, Susan confirms, voice flat. I forgot to mention, no one is allowed to backpack on the Lost Coast without a bear canister for food. Bears can smell food up to 2 miles away. No one speaks. Every single one of us is thinking of the various edible items stashed in our packs. The 2 granola bars in my pack make me feel like a bear magnet. Zombies, I can handle. Bears? No, thank you. We could eat everything now, Ash ventures. I hesitate, then shake my head. We're moving away from the bear tracks. I hope. We need to conserve the food. We'll need a constant source of fuel to keep us going throughout the day. We wolf down the 2 cans of beans, passing them around in pensive silence as the rain patters down on us. I toss the cans to the ground when we finish. It felt weird to toss garbage on the ground at the beginning of the apocalypse. Now, none of us is fazed by it. Lace up, I say. We've got an ultramarathon to run. "56. Pacer. Kate. There's a time-honored tradition in the ultramarathon world known as pacing. Simply put, pacing is accompanying a racer on part of his or her race. I used to pace Federico for as far as 50 or 60 miles when he ran 100-milers. On a granular level, pacing isn't as simple as just running with another person. It's studying the route ahead of time and watching for flags so your runner doesn't get lost. It's monitoring the food and beverage intake over the long miles to make sure your runner keeps himself fed and hydrated. It's helping him through rough spots, when he's bonking, raging, or puking his guts out on the trail. It's keeping an eye on the clock to make sure your runner doesn't miss any important cutoffs. On top of that, a pacer has to monitor his own food and drink intake. You can't pace a person if you're laid out on the side of the trail. As I usher my group down the beach, I realize this will be the toughest pacing job of my life. Not only do we have to contend with Mother Nature and all she throws at us, I have myself and 6 people to monitor. We're starting out wet, cold, and injured, with limited resources. There are no aid stations waiting for us at regular intervals. There is no option to drop from the run if things get hard. There are no gear bags waiting for us with dry clothes and clean socks. As we jog down the beach, black pebbles slowing our journey, I fall into step beside Susan. Her jaw is set. I have no doubt she's in pain from her rolled ankle, but it's good to see her sucking it up. She'll need that grit to make it out of here. Have you hiked the Lost Coast before? It would be helpful to have someone with knowledge of the trails. She shakes her head, panting as she jogs. Hike? No. Gary and I boated down here plenty of times for the fishing. I grew up with stories of the Lost Coast. Her brow wrinkles. Mostly of people getting washed away by the tide or just lost. Or having a close encounter with a bear. Well, there goes that idea. Susan knows about as much as I do about the Lost Coast, which is just enough to leave me terrified. I pull ahead, leading the pack down the black beach. Reed brings up the rear. My sweeper. Every race has sweepers, people who bring up the back of the pack to make sure no one gets left behind. We enter a stretch of beach that is true sand, the fine grains glistening black beneath my running shoes. I shift a little closer to the water where the surface is firmer for running. The cliffs to our left are tall, tan, and vertical. Black Sands Beach, Susan calls. No shit, Ben grumbles. I mean, that's the name of this beach, Susan says. The end of the beach marks the midway point of the Lost Coast Trail. How much farther after that? Eric asks. About 25 miles. I let that sink in. No one says anything. The rain continues to peter down. Even though I'm running, I'm cold. The wind from the coast, combined with the rain and clothes already soaking wet, are a bad combination. A glance down my line of runners shows me everyone in the same condition. I mentally run through the list of hypothermia symptoms: shivering, slurred speech, shallow breathing, slow pulse, clumsiness, confusion, drowsiness, and worst of all, unconsciousness. These are very real dangers. I grit my teeth. I'm getting everyone out of here if it kills me. I've survived zombies. I've survived loss. I've survived way too much other shit to lose to the trail. After running a little over an hour down the sand, I spot the end of Black Sands Beach. A pale line of dirt zigzags its way up the cliff. From that point on, the trail follows the contours of the land as it meanders down the coast, which means no more risky run-ins with the tide. It also means the end of the beach running, thank God. I'm ready for good old-fashioned dirt beneath my feet. This way, I call, gesturing to the trail. As I jog toward it, I feel something stir in my chest. I haven't had a real trail run since the start of the apocalypse. My feet move faster of their own accord, carrying me toward what feels like an old friend. There have been so many times in my life when I turned to the trail for comfort. Having that cut out of my everyday existence hasn't been easy. Ben understands that. It's the reason he covered my room with pictures of nature on my birthday. I glance in his direction. He looks back at me, nodding in understanding. Somehow, he knows what this means to me. It's baffling how well he understands me. I climb a short way onto the trailhead and pause, waiting for the others to catch up. Fennel and thistles line both sides of the hard-packed dirt. Farther ahead are gnarled cypress trees, bowed sideways from the constant battering of the elements. I inhale, pulling a lost world into my lungs.
If we weren't all at risk of dying, I'd say the world has just delivered a gift to you.
Ben is the first to reach me. The two of us are momentarily shielded from sight by the tall shrubs growing along the trail.
It suits you out here.
His voice is gruff as always, but his eyes are soft as he takes me in, framed by the trailhead.
It's like seeing you in your natural habitat.
His words create a warming sensation in my body. Regret flickers through me. I wish I'd ignored what he said to me the night we kissed.
Kate?
Yeah?
I'm sorry for what I said. That night of your birthday, I mean.
The words rush out of him.
On the roof. I shouldn't have said what I said. What I wanted to say that night was that I'd been wanting to kiss you for months.
I stare at him, tongue glued to the roof of my mouth. Of all the times to pick for an apology, Ben would decide to do it when we're sopping wet and stranded on one of the most dangerous trails of Northern California, our only privacy a tall scrub brush. Ben hunches his shoulders, like he's trying to disappear into his own body.
Words aren't my thing, Kate. I'm sorry. Really sorry. I just want you to know that. You know. In case we die out here. I want you to know.
He looks so contrite and miserable. I find myself releasing the mortification I've been dragging around like dirty socks for weeks, letting myself bask in the knowledge that he wanted to kiss me as much as I wanted to kiss him. But I can't help but compare Ben to Kyle. The comparison is a chain around my neck as real as the one Rosario once put there. Ben could not be any more different from the man I was married to for almost 20 years. The fact that we're attracted to each other doesn't change the fact that we might not be compatible in the long run. Thanks for telling me the truth. It means a lot, I say instead.
Can I try again?
He asks. I stop breathing. I can't look away. There is nothing that I want more than to kiss this man. It makes no sense, but there it is. It occurs to me that I might be in love with Ben. Anxiety mounts within me, a rising tide that scrambles my brain. Kyle's easy smile flashes before me. Easy-going Kyle with his kind smile. Ben doesn't even know how to smile.
I don't think that's a good idea.
My whisper is husky. I force myself to step back. This thing between us, whatever it is, I'm not sure it's a good idea. He draws in an uneven breath, breaking eye contact. I'm both disappointed and relieved when he doesn't make any argument. Creekside is a small community, I continue, trying to rationalize everything in my own mind. It's tight-knit. If we end up not liking each other as much as we think we do, it could disrupt everything. I need your friendship, Ben. I don't want to risk losing that by doing something stupid.
Okay.
It's his turn to take a step back. Something inside me crumples. I consider the wisdom of throwing my arms around his neck when a shout goes up.
Mama Bear, wait up.
Our moment evaporates, as does our privacy, as Caleb hikes up onto the trail, the others following behind him. I'm thankful for the distraction. Ben turns aside as though studying the plants growing along the path. This is the end of the beach trail, I tell the group. From here on out, we won't have any sand or riptides to deal with.
Gracias a Dios,
Ash mutters. This is a true trail run, I continue. There are some climbs ahead of us. We'll walk up the hills and try to run everything else. We'll pass through a few primitive campsites only accessible by foot. It's isolated out here, but there's always a risk of running into zombies in the campgrounds. We need to proceed cautiously.
Don't forget the bears,
Eric says.
That was one big-ass track back there on the beach.
Bears, I nod. There are bears. And rattlesnakes. Caleb taps his gun.
I can take care of any rattlesnakes.
Ben snorts.
You ever try to kill a snake with a gun? You have to be one hell of a shot.
If we see a rattlesnake, I say, give it wide berth. It's more afraid of us than we are of it. Besides, there's little chance of running into rattlesnakes out here today. It's too cold. Just don't be stupid if we do happen to run into one. What we are likely to run into is poison oak. I know we're all limited on clothing right now, but if anyone has long sleeves or long pants, now is the time to put them on. Make sure you know where your headlamps are. Oh, and be on the lookout for ticks.
Ticks?
Ash looks horrified.
Ticks? As in the little fuckers that carry Lyme disease?
Lyme disease is a bacterial infection caused by the bite of a tick. Initial symptoms are flu-like, but if untreated with antibiotics, a person can have lasting inflammation and neurological conditions. Yes, you can usually feel them bite you. If you feel a bite, stop and check. Federico and I picked countless ticks off ourselves and one another over the years. A very small percentage of ticks carry Lyme disease. Even if they do, they have to be embedded in your skin 36 to 48 hours to transmit the bacteria. Just make sure you get them off as soon as you feel them bite, and you should be fine. 6 sets of eyes stare at me in horror.
I'm not sure what's worse,
Reed says.
Getting bitten by a tick or getting bitten by a zombie.
Tick, Caleb says.
At least with the zombie, it's over quick.
Reed opens his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. Stay alert. Keep your eyes on the trail. I estimate we've traveled anywhere from 7 to 8 miles today already. We have another 25 miles to go. Today, you guys are going to finish your first ultramarathon. We stay together. We look out for one another. We get the hell off the Lost Coast and survive. Everyone understand? I wait to see everyone nod. All right. Let's go. I drop gears into a power hike, leading the group at a brisk walk uphill. Even though every part of me yearns to run, to fly up the hill and soak in the beauty like I used to, I force myself to moderate my pace. There will be plenty of time for running. The last thing I need to do is burn everyone out at the beginning of our journey. I'm the first to reach the short summit up from Black Sands Beach. Everyone has their heads bowed as they march uphill. No one is paying any attention to me, not even Ben. I take advantage of the momentary privacy to exhale, letting fear out of my chest. It washes over me in a hot wave so potent it almost has me on my knees. Frederico. I wish he were here. I wish we had done this trail together. Help me, Frederico, I say silently. Help me get everyone out of here alive. We've trained, but not for the Lost Coast. His reply comes clear as a bell in my head.
You're never completely ready for any race, no matter how hard you train. There's always a surprise or two on race day.
How many times had he said something similar to me when he was alive? More times than I can count. Then, as though from a great distance, I hear him again.
You got this, Jackalope.
I'm not sure if it's Frederico's voice or just the crash of the ocean. Tears prick the back of my eyes. It feels like he's here. Maybe a part of him is. A strong hand grips my shoulder. I squeeze my eyes. I want it to be Frederico. I miss my friend so much. But it's not Frederico.
You got this, Mama Bear,
Ben murmurs. Footsteps sound on the trail behind us. Ben shifts. To anyone coming up on us, it looks like he's falling in line behind me on the single-track trail. But I know better. Ben is shielding me with his body, giving me a few precious seconds to gather my fear and stuff it back down a deep, dark hole. He's giving me a moment to find Mama Bear. After what I just did to him, he's still looking out for me. I'm an idiot for turning him down. I want to kiss him. I want to kiss him almost as badly as I want to get off the Lost Coast. And I squandered my chance like a coward. There's nothing I can do about it now. I take off, jogging down the slope to the open trail beyond. It winds through a grassy meadow, the greenery bending under the weight of the pattering rain. The group follows in my wake. Everyone is silent, our footsteps and breathing the only sounds of humanity. Something happens over the next few miles. Tension sloughs off me. Anxiety recedes to a distant part of my mind. It's just me and the trail. My old friend. Everything is better when I can run. God, how I've missed the wilderness. How I've missed running for hours on end through the trees with nothing but my thoughts and labored breath for company. Being here on the trail is like returning to a long-lost home. I breathe in deep. I can almost see Frederico running ahead of me, gray ponytail bouncing with every step. I draw to a halt after an hour. It's still raining, and the mist from the ocean hangs low in the air, decreasing our visibility to only a few 100 feet. 5-minute break, I say. Time for food and water. I take out 2 of the granola bars. I break them into small pieces and hand them out as everyone arrives. After everyone eats their small bite, I make them drink. We're going to run out of water at some point. This is a fact I can't change. We can move on very little food, but dehydration is riskier for us than a waterborne illness. Well, I drank river water on my way to Arcata and didn't die. There's a good possibility the water out here is clean. It's remote enough that the risks should be low. Should be. Bathroom break, I call. Girls on the right side of the trail, boys on the left. Stay within eyesight of each other. As I drop into the grass with Susan and Ash, the dark-haired woman turns to me. I have to go number 2, she grumbles. Oh my God, Susan says on my other side. I don't think I'm going to be able to stand back up. My legs are already killing me. Just squat and let it out, I say to Ash. To Susan, I say, I'll help you up. Don't worry. I think my muscles are frozen in place, she replies. I'll get you up, I reassure her, not for a second letting her see sympathy or worry. I'm her pacer. I need to convey confidence if I want her to feel confident. I can't poo in front of people, Ash says. I have poo anxiety. Seriously, when I traveled with my girlfriends to Las Vegas and shared a hotel room with them, I didn't go all weekend. Just relax and let it out. Trust me when I say you don't want to be carrying any extra weight with you. How did you go at Creekside? Susan asks. We're all crammed in with one another. I go when everyone is either asleep or out during the day. My butt cheeks won't relax unless I'm alone. I purse my lips. Ash, you have to go. It's no use. It won't come out. Ash pulls up her shorts and stands. I frown, trying to think of what to do for her. Just call out if you need me to stop. No puedo creer esto, Ash grumbles, moving back to the trail. I help Susan to her feet, making it a point not to ask her about her ankle. She needs to focus on being strong, not on the pain. Motherfucker, Susan groans. Oh my God, I thought I was sore after that first week of running with you guys. I chuckle knowingly. Yeah, trail and beach running will beat you up in ways a track never can. I have muscles here, Susan prods her rib cage. I didn't know it was possible for ribs to hurt from running. Just think of the story you'll have for Gary when we get back, I reply. He may have survived a shark attack, but you're surviving a run down the Lost Coast. Susan frowns. I haven't survived yet. I tap her gently on the temple. Survival is up here, Susan. If you can survive for months on a boat, you can survive a day on a trail. They're not all that different. Besides, the hardest part is behind us. There are no more impassable zones. She opens her mouth, no doubt to argue, but the boys return to the trail and cut off whatever she was going to say.
Mama Bear, you should have told us to pack toilet paper, Eric complains. We should have practiced shitting in the bushes, Caleb says. It's hard to wipe with grass. You should have gathered stuff from the forest and had us practice wiping, Reed adds. You all went number 2, Ash demands. Hell yeah, Caleb says. It's not like I could drop my pants when we were running for our lives from the ocean. I've had to go for a while. Animales, Ash says under her breath. Try shitting in the desert and wiping your ass with sand, Ben says. You haven't lived until you've wiped your ass with sand that's 100 degrees. Yeah, old man, Caleb says. Always have to one-up us, don't you? You wouldn't complain about wet grass if you'd ever wiped your ass with sand, Ben retorts. It's like comparing Charmin to sandpaper. Everyone bursts out laughing. Even I join in, embracing the brief moment of mirth with the trails stretching out on either side of us. Then a chill travels across my body, reminding me that I'm cold and wet. Let's keep moving. We have to get off this trail by sunset. "57. Chafing. Ben. He doesn't know how long they've been at it. 2 hours? 3? It feels like 1,000. The beam of his headlamp illuminates the land around him. The southern trail of the Lost Coast is beautiful. Giant Douglas fir trees march up and down the undulating terrain, breaking apart every now and then to give them a glimpse of the ocean far below. Ben might actually enjoy being out here, if he didn't feel like shit. His body screams with every step he takes. How the fuck does Kate find joy in this shit? He's pretty sure it would be less painful to be trampled by horses. Mama, wait! Reed staggers a few steps off the trail and dry heaves into the dirt at his feet. This is the 4th time they've had to stop for Reed. He has a reputation for a weak running stomach for a reason. Ben doesn't complain about the momentary break, though he doesn't miss the covert glance Kate steals at her watch. She can't stop worrying about Alvarez.
Water.
Kate holds out the straw of her hydration bag. He drinks, mindful not to take more than a few mouthfuls. There isn't much left, and he doesn't want to think about what they're going to drink once it runs out. He's had dysentery and giardia, one in Somalia and the other in Afghanistan. It hadn't been pretty. And that was with first world medicine at his fingertips. Think we could find some berries or something to eat? Eric asks. Are you kidding? Reed straightens up, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Don't you remember the part about bears being out here? Bears eat berries. Humans eat berries, Eric replies. I'm fucking hungry, man.
Let's all keep our eyes out for berries.
Kate steps between the two boys who glare at each other. Ben doesn't recall ever seeing the two friends quarrel before. It's a sign of how fatigued everyone is.
There might be other edible plants. Let's just keep our eyes out.
Kate doesn't say what they should look for. Ben has a sneaking suspicion she knows as much about edible plants as the rest of them. But she won't ever let herself crack in front of her kids.
We have to keep moving, she says. Come on.
A few people groan, but everyone falls in line. Ben grits his teeth and focuses on the trail at his feet. His thighs are on fire, chafed from the stupid boxer briefs Caleb found him back in that bunker. This is what he gets for being vain and worrying about what Kate thought. Hell, he couldn't even talk her into a kiss. Why the fuck was he worrying about his underwear? With hours of silent running, he's had ample time to process the rejection. It chafes him almost as much as the underwear. Even though Kate is too good for him, and even though he can't list one compelling reason why she might want to be with him, it still smarts. Partly because it took him days to work up the courage to apologize to her, but mostly because his infatuation with her is reaching epic proportions. Never in his life has he been so crazy about a woman. Not even when he was a horny teenager. For fuck's sake, she'd turned him down right to his face. Twice. And he still can't move on. The searing pain around his thighs is almost unbearable. Should he ditch the underwear altogether? That will get him ridiculed, but he's beyond giving a shit. The only thing that stops him is the fatigue pants. He doesn't want to imagine his balls bouncing against the thick fabric. The last thing he needs is a chafed ballsack. His waist also itches and burns from the chafe marks that have accumulated over the weeks. He's added quite a few new ones today. In some areas, bits of his skin have thickened like calluses from the constant abuse. He should have brought the stick of secret deodorant. He hasn't touched it since the day Kate gave it to him. It sits on the small nightstand next to his bed, a token from Kate that fills him with a weird sort of pleasure. Where's a stick of deodorant when you need it?
Someone next to him barks out a laugh.
It takes him a beat to realize he's spoken aloud.
My bodily odor is the least of my worries,
Ash says. Not for that. Kate gave me a stick of deodorant. She said to use it as an anti-chafe.
Then I could definitely use some too,
Ash says.
My toes are killing me. I can feel blisters forming.
The light, misting rain covers Ash with a thin layer of sheen. Her skin is pale. You all right?
I'm freezing my tits off, but yeah, I'm okay.
The trail has widened, letting them run two abreast. Ben alternates between monitoring the trail and scrutinizing Ash. You look like shit, he pronounces.
Back at you, old man.
You're shivering.
I got dunked in the ocean and have been running in the rain ever since. What do you expect?
Ben searches for the right words. They all look like shit. Hell, they all feel like shit. But Ash is looking worse than shitty. She's looking like shit to the power of 3. I just want to make sure you're okay, he says at last. She gives him a sidelong look.
I think that's the nicest thing you've ever said to me.
Nice isn't my go-to.
I don't know why. You're a good person.
She coughs, hunching over as she runs.
I remind myself of that every time I want to tell you to go fuck yourself.
That happens a lot. She coughs again.
What?
That you want to tell me to go fuck myself? She chuckles.
Not as much since you started chasing Kate around. She brings out your nice side.
He decides not to comment on that. Apparently everyone in Creekside knows about his infatuation. He has no doubt they'll all soon know the color of his underwear, too, if they ever make it back.
So where are you chafing?
Ash asks. He grunts, deciding not to comment on that either.
Thought so,
she replies with a knowing look.
If it makes you feel better, I have chafing down there too. The inside seam of the shorts. And I think the skin under my sports bra is rubbed raw.
The salt water stings like a son of a bitch. The crusty white deposits all over his clothing make everything worse.
Gives a whole new meaning to rubbing salt in a wound, huh?
Another shiver runs over Ash's body.
You know, as shitty as I feel, I actually like it out here. No zombies.
No zombies yet, Ben corrects. Kate said there are some campgrounds farther down the trail.
You know what I mean. There are no piles of dead bodies, no stink. We don't have to whisper and look over our shoulders for fear of drawing zombies.
We just have to watch the tide so we don't get swept out to sea.
I'll take the tide over zombies any day.
She glances over at him.
Would you rather drown to death or get eaten by a zombie?
He considers his answer. Honestly, he doesn't really care how he goes. When it's his time, it's his time. I just want my death to mean something when it happens.
You don't want to die of natural causes as an old man?
I'm not sure any of us are slated for death by old age.
That's negative thinking. I'd rather drown in the ocean than get eaten by a zom. I don't ever want to be one of those things.
Would you rather get bitten by a zombie or by a shark like Gary?
That's a fucked up question, Ben.
He'd been trying to be sociable. He doesn't see how his question is any worse than her question. This is what he gets for trying to make civil conversation. Every response that comes to his mind isn't pleasant, so he keeps his mouth shut. Ash gives him another sidelong look.
I'd rather get eaten by a shark. At least my death would nourish another living creature. Anything is better than feeding the undead.
They lapse into silence after that. Ben stays near her, doing his best to keep an eye on her without being obvious. She's sucking it up, but she still looks like shit. And she keeps coughing. The ground beneath their feet is becoming muddier by the minute. Ben has mud splashed up to his knees. His clothes are damp and encrusted with salt. The salt makes his clothing rough. The chafing gets worse by the minute. He also feels it starting to burn on the inside of his upper arms, too. He steels himself against his discomfort when he sees Ash shivering. "We should stop," he says. "Build you a fire." She shakes her head.
It's still raining.
"We can still build a fire."
We both know I need more than a wet fire.
Ben doesn't reply. He doesn't know what to say. It's obvious Ash has hypothermia. He's known it for the past few miles, but doesn't know what to do about it.
Even if we do stop, we barely have any food,
she continues.
We can't afford to stop.
I don't know if you can afford not to stop. Ben looks farther up the trail. Kate plows up another rise in the land. Ash follows his gaze.
I can hold on. Please don't say anything. I don't want anyone to suffer or die because of me.
She puts her chin down and keeps running. Ben doesn't want Ash to die. He scans the landscape, looking for any place that might offer enough shelter for them to build a fire and get warm. Hell, he wouldn't mind a fire right about now, or a break.
You should tell her how you feel,
Ash says. Ben grunts. He wants to pretend he doesn't know what Ash is talking about, but what's the point? She knows. Ash looks at him. Her lips are pale. Her cheeks a fleshy white.
You should tell her again.
Her teeth chatter.
If we die out here, you don't want the words to go unsaid.
Ben has nothing to say to that.
"58. Pain Cave. Kate. I don't let them stop. Even though fatigue is in every line of their faces, even though their shoulders droop and their steps are sluggish, even though Reed can't get his stomach under control and staggers along like an animated doll, barely able to keep water down. Things are only going to get worse. Our only hope is to get the hell off this trail. Off this trail and into a house where we can get everyone warm and dry. My people stretch out in a line behind me, laboring up a long climb as rain drizzles down. I shine my headlamp down the trail behind me, conducting a quick count to confirm I haven't lost anyone. My gaze flicks over Ben as he power hikes with Ash at the back of the pack. Worry for our situation helps me ignore how conflicted I feel about Ben. I don't know if turning him down was the smartest or dumbest thing I've ever done. It's easier not to think about it. Caleb is the nearest to me. His shoulders are hunched, his face set in a grimace of discomfort as he pushes up a hill. I drop back to check on him. "Hey, Caleb."
"Hey."
Caleb braces his hands against his thighs, using them to help leverage himself up the long climb.
"I can't believe you did this shit for fun. It sucks ass."
Sweat drips down his temples, mingling with the rain. His breathing is labored, fogging against the cold air. The hair on his legs is stuck full of trail flotsam, burrs, foxtails, cuts from the thistles, and... Damn. Hold up, Caleb. There's a tick on your leg. The tiny black bug is nestled right above his sock. I crouch down and pick it off, squishing it between my fingers. His grimace deepens.
"You look like you've done that before."
"A few times. Yeah. I've already picked 2 off myself." I give the rest of his legs a quick check. "All clear. I don't see any more." He continues to labor up the trail.
"Does this fucking thing have a top?"
he demands.
"I think my legs are going to fall off."
I recognize his state. It happens to everyone in an Ultra. He's in the pain cave, a place of mental and physical misery. So much of Ultra running is a head game. I need to figure out a way to pull him out of his funk. "I didn't tell you guys the truth about the southern half of the Lost Coast," I say.
"What's that?"
"It has over 10,000 feet of vertical climbing."
"Is that a lot?"
I chuckle. "Oh, yeah. On a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being easy and 5 being difficult, the southern half of the Lost Coast is a 6. That's good news for you." He snorts.
"How so?"
"It means you'll have major bragging rights when we finish. Like pound your fist on your chest kind of bragging rights." All that gets is a grunt. We plow up the hill side by side. I rack my brain trying to think of something else to distract him. "If you could eat one thing right now, what would it be?" I ask.
"Medium rare, prime rib with a mountain of horseradish,"
he replies without hesitation.
"I haven't had decent beef since the start of the apocalypse."
We haven't had any fresh meat in months. "I think I'd have chicken," I say. "One of those rotisserie ones, stuffed with rosemary, lemon, and garlic. Now that we have a wall at Creekside, we should find some chickens."
"I'd rather have a cow or 2.
"Okay, let's see what we can figure out."
"Can I tell you something?"
His voice comes out with a wheeze.
"I'm pissed off at you for not making us run more stairs. Like, really pissed."
"Really?" I wipe rain out of my eyes. "That can be arranged when we get back to Arcata." That gets a small smile out of him.
"I hate stair repeats. Can I tell you something else?"
"What?"
"I'm so fucking hungry that I'm considering eating some of these plants. I'm trying to imagine the ferns are miniature green cows."
I understand the feeling. Hunger grates at me as well. "We'll have an M&M stop soon."
"Sorry if the idea of 5 M&Ms doesn't excite me all that much. Can I tell you something else?"
"Sure."
"You know the only reason Ben swam to shore to get gas for the Fairhaven is because he was afraid you'd do it? The man can barely dog paddle. He had no business swimming in Humboldt Bay.
The switch in conversation catches me by surprise. It feels weird to talk about Ben, but it's worth it to keep Caleb's mind off his misery. It's not a good idea. Me and Ben, I mean.
He likes you. You like him. What more do you need?
Sanity! Caleb chuckles, his face relaxing with mirth.
Well, I'm probably not the only one who thinks he's not good enough for you, but I know he'd die for you. Probably with a smile on his face. Hell, he stripped down into holy underwear for you. From a man's perspective, that's worse than taking a bullet for someone. He's got it bad for you, Kate.
I'd hardly noticed his underwear. I'd been too busy trying not to notice how good the rest of him looked. More rainwater drips into my eyes. Flicking it away, I think of my tiny dorm room, every inch of wall and ceiling covered with pictures of nature. Regret and longing once again flicker through me. Why are you telling me all this? You and Ben don't even like each other. Caleb's face goes stony.
I like him just fine. He's the one who doesn't like me.
An anguished look flashes across his features.
He has good reason. I fucked up and people died. I figured that maybe if I put in a good word for him, maybe he'll forgive me someday.
I don't even know what to say to that. Caleb looks even more morose and miserable than he did when I first joined him. I need to change the subject and find a way to perk him up. The Lost Coast will eat him for lunch if I can't help him shift his mindset. What about you and Ash? She cares about you, you know. That brings Caleb to a standstill in the middle of the trail. He looks from me to Ash, who labors away behind us with Ben at her side.
How do you know that? Did she say something to you?
No, but I see the way she looks at you when you're not glued to her side. Caleb resumes his power hike.
I messed things up with her.
How so?
Johnson sent me on an errand. Turns out it was just an excuse to get me away from Ash. By the time I got back, he'd cornered her in a bedroom of the frat house. Ash was fighting back, but it wasn't pretty. Johnson laughed the whole thing off when I showed up. Ash, things were never the same with her after that.
Is that why you guys sleep with your bedroom door open every night? He nods.
I don't ever want her to feel cornered.
The agonized look he gives me has nothing to do with the pain of the trail.
You know I'd do anything for her, right? I'm not asking for anything in return.
The pieces snap together. The restrained closeness between Ash and Caleb finally makes sense. The way they're always together, yet never touching. Not that I'm a relationship expert, but I'd say sooner or later you're going to have to let go of that guilt.
Maybe.
Caleb looks back again at Ash.
You really think she has feelings for me?
I'd bet on it, but you won't know for sure until you talk to her.
Let's make a pact. You agree to talk to Ben, and I'll agree to talk to Ash. No. Come on. You just said...
This isn't a negotiation, Caleb. I can't go there.
Whatever, Mama Bear. You... Hey, look!
He plants his hands on his hips, staring past the waist-high shrubs that grow along this part of the trail.
We made it to the top.
Sure enough, our feet have carried us to the top of the long incline. The foggy coastline snakes along below us, illuminated by the moon and stars. The water is a frothy gray. I take in Caleb's posture. The hunch of pain is gone. The twisted expression has been replaced with a smile. I give his shoulder a squeeze. Nice work.
Thanks, Mama Bear.
I leave Caleb to run the forthcoming downhill on his own, dropping farther back down the trail to check on Eric. He's near the top, slogging his way up with gritty determination. His arms are covered with scrapes from the thistle bushes. If possible, his leg hairs have even more burrs and foxtails than Caleb's. Hey! I fall into step beside him. I give him a once-over to check for ticks. How's it going? No visible sign of ticks.
I keep reminding myself that it sucked to be fat, Eric replies. Even if this hill sucks, at least it's keeping me skinny. Oh, and the fact that we have, like, half a granola bar to split among 7 people.
Don't forget the M&Ms, and there's still 1 stick of beef jerky left.
You probably shouldn't have told me that. I'm considering mugging you right now.
Eric's sense of humor is enough to tell me he's in a good headspace. Think you can take me?
You are pretty skinny.
But I'm faster than you.
True.
Eric chuckles.
How far do you think we've gone?
I glance at my watch. We left the beach 4 hours ago. We've had to stop at least 7 times for Reed. I try to pick up the pace on the flat sections, but my people are chilled by the rain. Their muscles are stiff with the new demands the trail puts on them. I doubt we've even gone 15 miles, which means we have 10 to 12 miles to go. Maybe 13 or 14 miles, I reply. Eric perks up. His glasses are spotted with rain, but he doesn't bother trying to wipe them dry.
That means I've done my first half marathon. That's 13 miles, right?
13.1 miles.
Hey, that's cool. I always wanted to run a half marathon.
His face sobers.
Lila used to ridicule me for that. Back before the world ended, we'd hang out in the hallway and trade insults. Well, it wasn't exactly hanging out, but you know what I mean.
For the first time in a long while, thinking of Lila makes me smile. I can imagine it. It took me a while to realize you both enjoyed bickering.
She used to tell me to lay off the crack pipe and lose some weight if I ever wanted to run more than 10 feet.
Eric taps his now flat stomach.
I wish she was here. I mean, not here. She'd hate it out here. The forest would definitely not be her happy place. Not like it is for you.
Is it that obvious? I know how miserable it is for all of them out here. Hell, it's not like I'm comfortable. But my discomfort is overridden by my love for the trail, and my long time away from it.
You're keeping it under wraps, but I know you, Mama Bear.
Eric winks.
Happiness is practically oozing out of you. Well, maybe not happiness. You're just in your element. That's all I mean. Even more so than when we're on the track or running for our lives through Arcata.
A soft laugh bubbles out of me. I'm glad I don't look like I'm having my own personal party. I sober. Eric, I'm sorry.
For what? For wanting to rescue Alvarez?
He shrugs.
You didn't force any of us to come. He's our friend, too.
Not that. I mean, Lila. It's my fault she went outside that day. If I hadn't been pushing her to leave Creekside...
Stop, Kate.
Eric holds up a hand.
It's not your fault.
He looks down at his feet as he splashes through a puddle.
We both know Lila wasn't cut out for the apocalypse. It was only a matter of time.
We don't know that.
I do.
Eric looks at me, but all I can see is the water smearing his glasses.
I cared about Lila. A lot. but I always knew she wouldn't make it for the long haul."
Hearing him say that makes me wish for a big, giant do-over. There must have been something I could have done differently to help Lila. I refused to believe her fate was predetermined. Our feet splash in the wetness pooling on the trail.
"I miss her,"
Eric says.
"Finding her recipe book was like—"
He makes a choking sound. I wait in silence. The ocean pounds away in the background, ever present. Eric recovers himself.
"I'm going to keep part of her alive. When I get back to Creekside, I'm going to start making her recipes."
He draws in a deep breath that has nothing to do with physical exertion.
"My mom was a recipe blogger. Did I ever tell you that?"
"No, you didn't."
"Yeah. She specialized in recipes you could cook in under 30 minutes. She used a lot of processed food, which I didn't realize was scary until I moved to Humboldt and got assaulted with propaganda on organic whole foods. I think Mom had 5 different casseroles you could make with a can of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup."
He chuckles.
"Anyway, I feel like I can pay tribute to both of them in my own way if I keep Lila's recipes alive. Although Mom wouldn't like it if she knew about the pot, even if it is for medicinal purposes." "Did I ever tell you about my first night of the apocalypse?"
Eric asks. I shake my head. I've made it a point not to ask people about that. If I don't want to talk about my experience, why would I think anyone else wants to?
"I was so stoned,"
Eric says.
"Like, majorly stoned. I got my hands on a new hybrid. Never mind. Anyway, I thought it would be fun to take mushrooms while I was stoned. I'd just finished 3 batches of brownies to trade for 3 term papers and wanted to celebrate."
He grins to himself, lost in a happy memory.
"I thought these 2 zombies were hot chicks. They had on low-cut tank tops and super short skirts. They looked scary, but I thought that was just the combination of mushrooms and pot. I was trying to work up the nerve to hit on them. Then they started eating this guy, and I thought my mushrooms were totally taking the wheel. Then Carter and Reed found me."
Despite the fact that I'm freezing my ass off, wet from head to toe, and hungry enough to eat raw seaweed, I laugh. I laugh so hard I double over. It's not funny. Not really. People died. A lot of people. But somehow, Eric's description makes me laugh. He grins at me.
"Who would have thought that being a chicken shit with girls would save my life? If you think that story is funny, I could tell you so many more."
Eric rattles on, spinning a long story about a high school crush, a botched attempt to get a prom date, and a faulty soda machine. I escape into the conversation, grateful to have my own distraction from the cold, wet, relentless trail. "59. Confession. Ben. There's something I want to tell you."
Ash's voice rattles out through her chattering teeth. Ben wishes he had a jacket or a blanket or anything warm to put over her shoulders. "We can talk later," he says. "Don't waste your energy."
"No."
Ash shakes her head. The ocean crashes, a constant hum in the background as they run.
"I should have told you a long time ago."
"It's waited this long."
"Stop arguing with me, Anaciano Casacarabias."
He has no idea what she just said, but he can hazard a guess. Ash often flips into Spanish when she insults someone.
Do you remember that day when Gary and Melissa went missing?"
"Yeah. How could he forget it? Those 2 girls snuck out of College Creek while everyone slept. Their note said they were going to the dorms on the north side of campus to see if they could find food. Ben knew it was a lie. They'd been afraid of Johnson. They'd run away. Johnson had known it too. He had a thing for Melissa. The way he looked at her left no doubt in Ben's mind what he intended, and it wasn't flowers and a romantic stroll. "I looked for them," he tells Ash, "after the massacre. When I went my own way, I scoured the north side of campus for any sign of them." That was how he'd found Kate and the others at Creekside, though he hadn't revealed himself to them at the time. He'd been hell-bent on tracking down Johnson and killing him. "Ash, I don't know what happened to them, but if they made it to the north side of campus, I never found them." He'd even looked for their bodies among the undead. The girls weren't cut out to survive. They were scared of everything and didn't know the first thing about taking care of themselves. Hell, Carrie admitted to having never done her own laundry until moving away to college, and half the time she just took everything to the dry cleaner and paid to have it washed.
"They never made it to the north side of campus,"
Ash whispers.
"They tried to sneak away. I was keeping watch at the time. Johnson caught them."
Ben grinds his teeth. He wants to plug his ears, but there's no escape.
"Johnson and Ryan."
Ash swallows.
"They caught Carrie and Melissa as they tried to sneak away.
She stops, a cough racking her body. "I asked you," Ben says. "The next morning, when we realized they were missing, I asked you if you saw anything."
"I lied."
Ash doesn't look at him.
"I'm sorry, Ben. I was so fucking scared of Johnson. The only reason he didn't try to touch me in the beginning is because he knew I could defend myself. But it was only a matter of time."
"What happened to Carrie and Melissa?" Ben demands. Ash dissolves into another round of coughs. She looks worse than ever, though this time Ben doesn't think it has anything to do with the hypothermia.
"I have never been so scared as when I was living in that Multidita frat house with all those boys. I'd face 100 zombies before I'd put myself through that again. Caleb did his best to shield me."
Her face crumples.
"But he couldn't be with me every second of the day. Johnson made sure of that."
Ben wants to hit something. "What did that fucker do?"
"Not as much as he wanted to do, but a lot more than I wanted."
Her face is wet with rain, but Ben doesn't miss the tears snaking down her cheeks.
"Johnson and Ryan killed Carrie and Melissa. They caught the girls and dragged them to the library. I found their bodies. They'd been raped before Johnson and Ryan killed them."
She chokes on a sob.
"I didn't do anything to stop them. I could have told you. I could have intervened. But I was a coward."
Something inside Ben cracks open. God damn it. He'd known. In his gut, he'd known Johnson and Ryan had done something to those girls. The tally in his head goes up. Instead of 16 kids on his conscience, he now has 18. Why are you telling me this? His voice comes down like a hammer. He couldn't hold his anger back even if he tried.
I'm sorry I lied to you that day,
Ash whispers.
If I'd told you the truth, if I hadn't been a coward, I could have saved the rest of the students. If I'd told you the truth, you could have gotten the rest of them away. You could have taken them to Creekside, to Kate.
Her voice breaks. She stops in the middle of the trail, body convulsing with shivers.
It's my fault all those students died.
She gasps. Ben has no words. He'd failed Ash. That was the simple truth. He'd seen the fear in her eyes when he questioned her about the disappearance of Melissa and Carrie. He'd suspected she knew more than she let on. Yet he had done nothing. Every day he'd stood by and done nothing. He'd been in denial as to how dangerous Johnson was. He'd stood by with his thumb up his ass and all those kids had been slaughtered. Anger and self-loathing boil up within him. He can't speak. He doesn't know how to tell Ash how very, very sorry he is.
Ben,
Ash murmurs.
I just wanted you to know the truth. Don't hate Caleb for something I did.
Her knees buckle. Ben catches her as she falls.
"60. Old friend. Kate.
Kate!
Ben's bellow grinds me to a halt in the middle of the trail. I spin around to find him running toward me, Ash clutched to his chest. She's unconscious, her body flopping with his cadence. Caleb tears down the trail back in their direction. Hypothermia. The word flashes through my mind. The wet, the cold, the exhaustion. It's gotten the better of Ash.
We need a fire,
Ben shouts.
Right fucking now.
I spin on my heel, taking in the soaking trees, the soaking trail, and the soaking ferns. Rain continues to patter down from the sky. The fog sits low against the land, compounding the dampness. Caleb takes Ash's limp body. Ben sprints toward me.
Fire!
He shouts again.
We're going to lose her if we don't get fire. There's nothing to burn,
Eric whispers, face riveted on Ash and Caleb.
Everything's wet.
Something in me hardens. No way am I going to let Ash die. We burn down a tree if we have to, I snap. So what if our world is drenched in water? So what if we have no food and are on the brink of running out of water? Whatever it takes, we get a fire started. Eric wipes at the water on his glasses, eyes wide.
Come on, Reed,
he cries, bolting off the trail and into the greenery.
We need to find a place to start a fire.
30 minutes later, our party crouches inside a tight ring of Douglas firs a quarter-mile off the trail. The ground beneath the trees is the only piece of relatively dry land we've found since emerging from the ocean. Our fire is pathetic. Finding dry wood has been a joke. The only thing we've been able to burn are pine needles.
Come on, girl,
Caleb murmurs, his face twisted in anguish.
You've survived worse. A little cold isn't going to get the best of you.
He's stripped out of his wet shirt, his bare chest pressed to Ash's back. She's been stripped to the waist, in nothing but her sports bra. The sight of the chafe marks under her armpits and along the bottom of her sports bra makes me wince. The salt in the clothing has been brutal on all of us, but somehow it all looks worse on Ash. Her arms and legs are covered with tiny cuts from the thistle patches we pushed through.
Shit.
Ben leaps to his feet, stalking out of our shelter. He marches up to a young pine tree, running his hands over the wood.
Fuck me. I can't believe I didn't see these earlier.
What is it? I join him at the tree. He pulls out his knife and begins prying out a section of bark.
See these?
He points to a few dried white streaks on the outside of the bark. Bird poop?
No. Dried sap. See these bumps in the bark? They're filled with sap. My old man showed me how to make fires with bark like this when he took me camping as a kid.
Realization dawns. Tree sap. It's flammable. With sudden hope filling me, I yank out my knife and also begin prying up a section of bark. In less than 2 minutes, we have 2 large handfuls of bark. We rush back to the shelter.
Everyone get back,
Ben orders. He begins snapping the bark into smaller pieces, revealing small, gooey pockets of sap. I've never seen Ben so focused. He crouches before the small pile of burning pine needles, holding a raw edge of bark over the flames. Within several seconds, the sap ignites.
No way. How did you do that?
Reed gapes. Tree sap, I explain. Ben's idea. Go find some more bark like this. I hand Reed a sample from my harvest with Ben. He wordlessly takes the bark. With a nod at Eric and Susan, the 3 of them hurry into the rain to find more bark. Ben stares at the fire with fixed intensity, steadily feeding it larger pieces of sap-infused bark. He also throws handfuls of pine needles onto it, sending up huge puffs of smoke and steam every time he does. Eric, Reed, and Susan return with another armload of bark. I kneel on one side of Ash, working my hands up and down her bare arms in an attempt to warm them. Caleb rubs her stomach, trying to do the same. Every part of her is damp and chill, her skin sickly white. Susan, Reed, and Eric all strip out of their running shirts and have pulled extras out of their packs. They hold the pieces of clothing over our fire, trying to dry them so Ash and Caleb can use them as blankets. Ben curses under his breath, worried eyes constantly flicking to Ash. If this had been a real Ultra, Ash would be in a medic tent right now. That's what happened to me at the JFK 50-miler when I got hypothermia. A thunderstorm had shown up at the start of that race and decided to stick around for the duration. By the time I staggered to the finish line, I hadn't been in much better shape than Ash. The race director put the medal around my neck and hustled me off to the medic tent, where I spent the next 5 hours. They packed hot water bottles around me, layered me with blankets. Wait. Water bottles. I snatch my pack off the ground and stare at the water bladder inside. Does anyone have a pot or something we can heat water in? I ask.
I have a collapsible metal bowl in my pack.
Reed dives into his pack, rummaging inside. He produces the bowl and pops it open. Figure out a way to hold it over the fire, I tell him. We're going to heat water. I stand, grabbing the running packs dumped in a pile on the ground. The bladders inside all need to be filled. Ben looks at me sharply.
Where are you going?
Water. We need to heat water and put it in our bladders and pack them around Ash. Maybe get some hot water into her.
You can't go out there alone,
he says with a scowl. I scowl right back. There are no zombies out here. Hell, there are no people out here. You need to focus on the fire. Get it nice and hot. The rest of you, keep drying out clothing. And figure out a way to suspend that bowl over the fire. I turn my back on Ben, ending the conversation. I march out from beneath the trees before anyone else can argue with me. In my head, I retrace the route we'd taken to get here. About a half-mile back, we crossed a swollen creek that came up to my knees. That's where I'm going to get water. I take off at a run, charging through the water-laden grasses that grow close to the coast. I dodge around trees and clumps of thistle, making a mental note to check everyone for ticks again when I get back. What's wrong with me? Why am I worried about ticks when Ash's life is on the line? I shake my head, struggling to get my emotions in order. I can't slip now. My kids need me. I burst through a clump of fennel and clear a mess of cobwebs out of my face. The trail looms in front of me, a muddy track stretching to the left and right. Finally! I leap onto the dirt path and take off at a sprint, my headlamp illuminating my way. It's the fastest I've moved since first setting foot on this trail. It doesn't take long before I realize just how depleted I am. Between the near miss with the ocean, the stress of all the events leading up to the shipwreck, and the short supply of food and water, I'm wasted. My body is sluggish, refusing to move as fast as I know it can move. Ash. Ash. I say her name over and over in my head. I charge through puddles. Mud and water fly up, soaking me all the way to the waist. Ash. I hear the creak before I see it. I tear around a corner and drop to my knees at the bank. My cold, wet fingers fumble with the first bladder. The plastic opening keeps slipping in my grasp. My fingers are too numb to grip properly. Damn it! I hurl the bladder to the ground in frustration, breath rasping. Ash! Tears sting my eyes. I got her into this mess. I can't fail her. I snatch up a bladder and flip it upside down, pinching the seal between my knees. This time, when I pull at the plastic, the opening slides free. I push the first bladder into the water. The creek is flowing so fast it almost rips it out of my hands. Crouched there, on the side of the bank, alone in the rain, it all comes crashing down on me. The helplessness of our situation. The fact that I have 6 green runners in my care and that I'm trying to keep them alive on one of the toughest trails on the West Coast. The odds are stacked against us, and no matter what I do, things just keep getting worse. My breath quickens. I swallow back tears. Now is not the time for self-pity. Something moves on the far side of the bank. I blink, trying to clear water out of my eyes. The world is blurry from all the rain, which seems to be coming down harder than ever before. Just great. I fill the rest of the bags, wondering if there's a way to warm the water inside without melting the plastic. Reed's bowl won't fill more than 1 liter of water at a time. That's not fast enough. I see movement a second time. My chin jerks up. An animal materializes on the other side of the bank, staring at me. He stands about 1.5 feet high, if you don't count the antlers. The elegant set of antlers sits like a crown on his furry brown head. Hola, chica! The jackalope cocks his head at me, watching as I fill the water bladder. I lick dry lips, queasy at the sight of him. The fact that my old nemesis is here tells me exactly how stressed and exhausted I am. The last time I saw him, I'd run over 100 miles and lost my best friend. I haven't even gone 25 miles, yet here he is. Hallucinations aren't unusual on an Ultra. Now that I think about it, I have been up for nearly 24 hours. I've been shot at, shipwrecked, nearly drowned, then forced to grind away on a trail for hours in the rain without proper food and water. No wonder I'm seeing things. I finish filling the water bladder, all the while ignoring him. When I finish, I get to my feet and turn my back on the hallucination. "Don't rip off my antlers," the jackalope says, then leaps over the creek and lands beside me. I flinch away from him, running back down the trail. There's no way to drop a hallucination. He hops along beside me, not even breaking a sweat. The little fucker isn't even wet. Of course he's not wet. He's not even here. He's a figment of my imagination.
Go away,
I snarl.
You need me,
the jackalope says. I don't need you.
Do you remember that time you worked the aid station at Bryce Canyon and a thunderstorm hit?
I don't have time for this, I scream, clutching the bladders to my chest. I spin on my heel and keep running, retracing my steps back toward our camp.
Fine, whatever,
he shouts after me.
Just don't forget what happened to your canopy.
My mind races back to a time when the world was normal, when the most I had to worry about was getting injured on a training run or making sure Carter did his homework. My memory hurtles me back to the reddish-brown landscape of Bryce Canyon, a national park in the state of Utah. The towering cliffs and sweeping vistas of that place were nothing short of magical. I was supposed to run the 100-miler with Frederico, but a bad fall on the trail a few weeks before had left me with a broken wrist. Rather than stay home and sulk, I volunteered to work one of the aid stations. Little did I know one of the biggest storms of the season was headed straight for us. The late spring storm had been brutal. Rain, hail, more rain. I spent the day ladling out soup to soaked, muddy runners with chattering teeth. The worst part had been at 2 a.m. when our aid station canopy, laden with water from the storms, had tipped over. I grind to a halt, mind racing. Yes, the canopy. Water had collected in the canvas. It created a giant bowl. That's it, I breathe. I snap my head around, searching. The jackalope is gone. All I see is the rain and trees. It doesn't matter. I know what to do. I know how to save Ash. "61. Hot water. Ben.
He alternates between swearing at the fire, worrying about Ash, scanning the area for signs of Kate's return, then swearing some more. I think this shirt is finally dry. Eric moves around the fire and drapes it over Ash and Caleb. More wood, Ben says. We need more wood. Eric turns without a word, leaving their makeshift shelter to search for more logs. With the help of the sap-filled bark, they have a decent fire going. They can feed it regular logs now, so long as they aren't too sodden. Come on, girl, Caleb murmurs, rocking Ash in his arms. You're too strong to give up now. You didn't make it through hell to die like a deer in the woods. Ben feeds another log to the fire. It's wet. Not soaking, but wet enough that it sizzles and sends up a gush of steam as soon as it hits the flames. The interior of the fire is burning steadily. What he needs now is a poker to break apart the logs and expose the coals within. That's the best place to put the new logs. He casts about the dark shelter of the trees, searching for a branch that can be used as a poker. There's nothing. Everything serviceable has already been fed to the fire. He spots a Douglas fir tree 20 yards east. Eric crouches beneath the boughs, picking up pieces of wood. Be right back, Ben says. Reed and Susan glance at him. Caleb never looks up, continuing to rock Ash back and forth. I need a long branch, Ben tells Eric as he arrives at the Douglas fir. Something that can be used as a poker. Like this? Eric extracts a branch from the stack in his arms. It's a sturdy piece of wood,
2 inches thick and 3 feet long, the length covered with green lichen.
That'll work. Give me what you've collected so far. It's kind of dry, Eric says, passing the bundle of wood to Ben. Good work. Find more. Back at the fire, he uses the branch to stoke the fire. The larger logs break apart, exposing orange-yellow coals. The newest log catches fire, long tongues of flame licking upward. Perfect. Ben moves around the fire, adding more logs to all sides. Within 15 minutes, the fire has doubled in size. Heat roils off it in steaming puffs. Nice work. Reed fans steam and smoke out of his eyes. He fiddles with the bowl, attempting to tie a fresh sapling around it to create a holder. It'll never work. But Ben doesn't say this. From the look of anguish on Reed's face, it's better if the kid has something to preoccupy his thoughts. At least Susan is doing something productive. She stands next to the fire, a shirt in each hand as she dries them over the flames. It's slow work, but Ash already has 2 other shirts draped over her. Where the hell is Kate? He peers into the drizzly gloom. There's no sign of her anywhere. He does his best to ignore the knot of anxiety forming in his chest. Kate is more than capable of taking care of herself. Hell, she made it all the way to Arcata without his help, and she'd been alone for much of the time. None of this makes him feel any better. He should have gone with her. How long has it been? At least 30 minutes, probably more. How long does it take to get water? The weight is killing him. He straightens, intending to go search for her. There's nothing else he can do with the fire right now. Besides, maybe he can find some more dry wood while he's looking for Kate. Anything is better than standing around watching Ash struggle. It's more than he can take. Just as he turns to exit the shelter, Kate bursts into view. She runs hard through the brush, juggling 5 hydration bladders in her arms. "Take off your shirt!" she yells as soon as she sees him. "What?" "The shirt! Your shirt! Take it off!" she orders. He doesn't ask questions. He would have added it to the blanket efforts if it wasn't so thick and wouldn't take too long to dry. From the urgency in Kate's face, he knows she has a plan. Hell, if he's going to get in the way of that. He peels off his damp fatigue shirt as Kate dashes into the shelter. She sees the blazing fire and nods in approval. "Where's Eric?" she asks. "I'm here." Eric hurries into the shelter, cradling an armload of wood. "You 3. She points a finger at Ben, Reed, and Eric. "I want you each to grab a corner of Ben's shirt. Hold it over the fire." She sets her pile of bladders on the ground, pausing only long enough to press a hand to Ash's forehead. "Hang on, girl," she murmurs. Caleb lifts anguished eyes to her. Kate gives his shoulder a squeeze. "Keep doing what you're doing." As she grabs one water bladder and approaches the fire, Ben suddenly understands what her plan is. Kate empties the full bladder of water onto the shirt. The camouflage fabric bows downward, creating a bowl above the flames. A few droplets sizzle down into the flames, but the majority of the liquid remains trapped in the tight weave of the shirt. Fucking brilliant. Admiration washes through him. Kate flashes him a quick smile before turning a worried frown back in Ash's direction.
It hasn't worked yet.
No one says anything. They all stare at the water in the center of Ben's shirt. "A watched pot never boils," Eric says, breaking the silence. "This isn't a pot," Ben says, right as Kate says.
"We don't want it to boil. We just need to warm it up enough so we can fill the bladders back up and put them next to Ash's skin."
"The fire is helping," Caleb says. "Her stomach is finally starting to warm up." He runs a hand up one of her arms. Her arms, too. 20 minutes later, Kate holds the first bladder of warm water out to Caleb. He sandwiches it between his chest and Ash's back, never loosening his desperate grip on the young woman in his arms. Kate grabs the next bladder and empties it into the shirt.
"One down,"
she murmurs. "How did you think of this?" Reed asks.
"You wouldn't believe me if I told you."
"Oh, now you have to tell us," Eric says. "You can't get cryptic on us." Kate stares into the flames, not answering. "Mama," Reed wheedles. She gives him a small smile.
"My imaginary friend helped me out."
Ben can't keep his mouth shut any longer. "Your what?"
"My imaginary friend. He visited me while I was filling the water bladders and told me how I could heat the water."
If her face wasn't dead serious, and if Ben didn't know her as well as he did, he would say she was full of shit. But Kate doesn't spin fancy stories. She doesn't lie, either.
"Do you guys know what a jackalope is?"
Ben listens in astonishment as she tells them about a rabbit with antlers that appears to her in times of great physical stress. She tells them about the time she ran some crazy race in Death Valley in the middle of the summer. That was the first time the jackalope appeared. Then she tells them about her 30-mile journey through the Avenue of the Giants. It's the first time Ben has ever heard her share details of her 200-mile trek from her hometown to Arcata. Johnny would be out of his fucking mind right now if he was here. She shares a story of ripping off the antlers of her imaginary jackalope and drop-kicking the little beast into the woods. Eric's eyes bug behind his glasses when she tells this part. Ben is pretty sure his eyes might be bugging a little too. At some point on her trek through the Avenue of the Giants, she and the little creature had made up. The jackalope helped Kate say goodbye to her husband and her best friend. She stares into the fire as she speaks, not bothering to wipe away the few tears that leak down her cheeks. Ben feels fissures crack open inside him as Kate talks. He feels her pain. It echoes so much of what he carries around. "That," Reed proclaims when Kate finishes talking, "is the weirdest fucking thing I've ever heard." Kate shrugs.
"I hate that little fucker, but he's been there when I needed him. He's helping us save Ash."
"Is he still here?" Ben frowns out into the darkness, as though he might find a horned rabbit staring back at him.
"No. He left right after he delivered his message."
"Does he have a name?" Eric asks.
"No. He's just the jackalope. That was Frederico's nickname for me for years."
No one says anything. They all know about Frederico. She's talked about him more in the last 10 minutes than she has in all the months Ben has known her. Eric is right, Caleb says. We need to name him. I think he may have saved Ash's life. Her skin is really warming up now. Kate sticks her finger into the water, balancing over the fire.
This batch is almost ready. We can keep rotating the bladders and make sure they stay warm.
We're naming the jackalope, Reed declares. How about Randy? Randy. Ben furrows his brow. I don't know. It just came into my head. That's a stupid-ass name, Eric says. How about Hopper? Hopper? Ben scowls across the fire. He hadn't realized it could get any worse than Randy. But it just did.
Creekside?
Every head in the clearing jerks around. Ash's eyes are slits as she blinks blearily.
You're awake.
Kate kneels next to her, running a hand over the younger woman's forehead and arm.
You're warmer. I want to name your jackalope,
Ash murmurs, voice slurred.
He saved my life.
As Kate gazes down at Ash, every line of her body says just how much she cares about her people. The curve of her cheek as she smiles, the gentle hand on Ash's forearm, the line of her back as she leans in to kiss Ash's forehead. Ben can't take his eyes off her. He never knew it was possible for one person to care so much about others. It radiates off Kate in waves. It's the most beautiful fucking thing he's ever seen. Kate sits back, smiling at Ash.
I'll give you the privilege of naming my imaginary friend. Creekside,
Ash whispers.
His name is Creekside. He got you to us in Arcata. He's our guardian spirit.
Creekside, Caleb echoes. That's a great name. Kate stiffens, her eyes traveling past Ash and Caleb. Ben's hand flies to the gun holstered at his side. He flips up the safety strap and slides it out. He stares past Kate, trying to see whatever it is that she sees. He scans the clump of lupine bushes that sag in the rain, purple flowers bowed under the unending barrage. He scans the knee-high brush and the tight knot of trees that shelters them. Then Kate does something unusual. Mouth twisting into a grimace, she extends one middle finger into the air. Everyone stares at her in shock. Then Reed bursts out laughing. He's here, isn't he?
Yes.
Kate turns her back on the empty space of air she'd just flipped off. Creekside? Eric says. Really? He squints at the empty space behind Ash and Caleb.
Yep.
Kate's expression is a mixture of a grimace and a chagrined smile.
He wants you all to know he likes his name. Oh, and he wants me to make sure you all know how awesome he is. He may have even thumped his chest. 2 times.
The bizarre conversation finally catches up with Ben. A jackalope. A horned bunny, for Christ's sake. It talks to Kate, and she tells him to fuck off with her middle finger. He feels something rise in his chest, the pressure worming its way upward. Before he realizes what's happening, a chuckle slips past his lips. 5 sets of eyes turn to him in surprise. Another chuckle bubbles up, then another, until he's bent over roaring with laughter. I'm sorry, he wheezes between guffaws. It's just nice to know I'm not the only one out of my goddamn mind. Kate bursts out laughing. It's the first genuine smile she's given him since that disastrous birthday kiss. Their eyes lock, and even though he's soaking wet in the middle of the woods with nothing on but a pair of pants, Ben is suddenly warm from head to toe.
"62. Deal with it. Ben.
The fire continues to blaze. Ben sits with his back against a Douglas fir, staring into the flames. Everyone is curled up on their sides, asleep. The rain has finally stopped. His clothes have mostly dried out. He likes watching Kate sleep. She looks good when she isn't worried all the time. She lies on the ground next to Ash, one hand entwined in the younger woman's. It's well past time for Ben to pass his watch shift to Reed. He doesn't bother. It's not like he can sleep anyway, and Reed snores blissfully on the ground. At least someone out here should benefit from a good night's sleep. And the quiet time has given him a chance to clean the weapons still in their possession. Something moves. Ben shifts, then relaxes as Caleb gets to his feet. The young man moves gingerly, not wanting to disturb Ash. He walks to the edge of the firelight and turns his back to take a piss. "I've been holding that for hours," Caleb says to no one in particular, letting out a long sigh of relief. "It's the last good piss you're going to have for a while," Ben replies. "We're all out of potable water." Caleb pulls his shorts back into place and turns. "I should probably care about that, but I don't. I'll drink out of the creeks and streams." The younger man stretches his arms, eyeing Ben from across the fire. When Ben looks at Caleb, he realizes he doesn't feel hatred and loathing anymore. For the first time, he sees Caleb for what he really is. A young man, no more than 22 or 23 years old. A young man with a good heart who hadn't chosen his friends as wisely as he should. Fuck. When do young men ever do anything wise? Ben had more than his share of loser friends throughout his life. More than his fair share of bad decisions, too. And not just when he was a young man. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Caleb asks. "Like what?" "Like you don't think I'm the firstborn of Satan." The darkness moves behind Caleb. Ben blinks, realizing how exhausted he is. How long has he been awake? 24 hours at least, if not longer. Maybe he's starting to hallucinate, like Kate. The darkness continues to move. A rancid smell wafts through camp. "What's the smell?" Caleb asks, wrinkling his nose. The smell hits Ben full in the face. It's like walking past a dumpster in a dark alley. No way in hell a hallucination can smell like death. "God, it smells like a garbage dump," Caleb says. "Where's it coming from?" He turns, peering in the direction of the stench. Ben shifts into a crouch, drawing his gun. In his fatigued state, he'd left his knife on the other side of the fire where he'd used it to strip wet barks from logs. Since they arrived at the Lost Coast, they've been without the constant stink of the undead hanging in the air. Apparently, their reprieve is over. A zombie, or zombies, has found them. The darkness behind Caleb solidifies. Except it's not a zombie. Outlined in the firelight is a creature that easily weighs 600 pounds. It rears up, rising 7 feet into the air. A roar rips from its mouth, vibrating Ben down to his core. The world narrows to a split second. All Ben's time at College Creek blurs by in his mind's eye. He sees a new version of Caleb in the replay. Caleb was always the voice of reason in Johnson's ear. Any time the other boy let his brutal streak show, Caleb was there, attempting to talk him down. Most of the time it worked. Then Johnson started putting distance between himself and Caleb. He'd go out scavenging with Ryan and some of the crueler boys. He always had an excuse and a buddy-buddy fist bump for Caleb when he returned, but the truth was that he shied away from the moral compass of his friend. Caleb had been there on the day of the College Creek massacre. He'd been the one screaming at Johnson. "Stop! Don't do this! Johnson, stop!" Ben finally realizes the truth. Caleb is one more person Ben has failed. He's another College Creek casualty. He failed Caleb as surely as he failed all the kids who are dead and gone. Caleb was right. Ben had done nothing. He'd had plenty of chances to kill Johnson. He'd failed. He'd failed them all. Most of them are gone. He'd never have a chance to make up his failure. But Caleb is still here. Ben still has a chance at redemption. He isn't going to fail Caleb a second time. With a shout, he flings himself toward the younger man. He crashes into him, sending Caleb flying into the brush. The bear drops to all fours, another roar ripping through the camp. Ben's world narrows to a singular focus. The bear. The smell. The enormous paws that could shred him open with one swipe. The teeth that could tear off his arms. Ben hits the ground, skidding across dirt and pine needles on his back. Pure instinct takes over. The gun in his hand comes up. The bear charges. Ben fires, emptying his magazine. His shout is lost in the roar of challenge that issues from the great animal. The bear crashes to the ground, body skidding into the firelight. Its face is a mash of red from the bullets. Blood pours out of the ruined muzzle, staining the ground. Ben's breath rasps in and out of his lungs. Adrenaline beats in his ears. His legs tremble as he gets to his feet. Caleb crouches in the brush just outside of their shelter, slack-jawed in shock and horror. Moving on shaky legs, Ben crosses the clearing. He holds out a hand to the other man. "I'm sorry," His voice is hoarse. There is so much more to say, but it's the best he can do. The intensity of the adrenaline makes his arm tremble. Caleb rises and lets out a long breath, eyes still wide. He grasps Ben's hand. The beat passes. Then he yanks Ben into a hug. It's not an embrace by any means, more of a shoulder bump and some slapping on the back. Ben returns the back slaps with awkwardness. The anger he's carried around since the day of the College Creek massacre dissipates, puffing away like smoke in a breeze. Caleb grins at him, face still crazed with fear from his near-death encounter with the black bear. Ben returns the grin, feeling feral. Ben? Someone grabs him by the shoulder and whips him around. The entire camp is awake, everyone on their feet as they gawked at the dead black bear. Kate stands in front of him, eyes wild as she scans his body.
Are you okay? Did the bear get you anywhere?
Adrenaline still pounds through him. Blood roars in his ears. He can't form words.
Ben!
He grabs her by the arms, squashing her against him. She squawks in surprise. Ben silences her with a fierce kiss on the lips. He drinks in the taste of her, savoring the glory of being alive, of not hating Caleb. God damn it. He never hated Caleb. He hated himself. The roaring in his ears subsides. He becomes aware of applause. The kids are clapping, hooting and catcalling. "About time," someone shouts. It might be Reed. "Way to grow a pair," someone else says. That might be Caleb, the little shit. Ben disengages, putting an arm's length between himself and Kate as a semblance of sanity returns to him. She made it clear she doesn't want him to kiss her. He decides he doesn't give a shit. "Deal with it," he says to her. She gapes at him. Someone hoots with laughter. He stares down at her, still half feral from the encounter with the bear. His chest heaves. It takes all his willpower not to drag her back into his arms and kiss her again. Is she angry? He can't tell. This thought is followed by the formation of words which flow out of his mouth. "I'm not sorry," he tells her. "Deal with it." She blinks, her face still painted with shock and surprise. Then she grabs him by the front of the shirt, knotting her fist in the fabric.
"You deal with it,"
she snaps, dragging him forward. She rises up onto her toes to kiss him. This kiss is longer, deeper. It would be perfect if not for the fucking peanut gallery ringing the two of 'em.
"You owe me a night shift,"
Ash says. Her voice is a croak, but the glee is unmistakable.
"I told you he'd make a move before we got to Fort Ross."
"Damn it, old man," Caleb says. "You screwed me. You weren't supposed to grow a pair until we got back home."
"I get Eric's pair of Nikes,"
Reed crows.
"And I get Eric's alien socks,"
Susan adds.
"Fuck both of you,"
Eric replies. His voice is jovial, Not an ounce of rancor there, despite his words. "Joke's on you. The Nikes have mold on the inside, and the alien socks have a hole in the toe."
"Don't be a sore loser,"
Susan says.
"It doesn't suit you."
"Hell, Ben had to swim in holy underwear, survive pirates and a shipwreck, escape the impassable zone, and kill a bear to work up the nerve to make a move," Eric replies. "Up until 10 seconds ago, I thought I had this in the bag." Ben wants to hold Kate in his arms and kiss her for the next 20 years, but he can't take it anymore. "Do you little shits have to talk all the time?" he demands. 60 seconds of silence. Is that so much to ask for? Everyone bursts out laughing. He feels his face grow hot. He sneaks a look at Kate. Her brow is furrowed in consternation, but she hasn't retreated. She leans into him, her shoulder pressed into his bicep. He decides to go big. Why not? He just killed a goddamn black bear. He puts both arms around her shoulders, pulling her close against his chest. Kate doesn't resist or protest. She turns a shy smile up at him before resting her head against him. Ben decides this might be the best night of his life. "Hey, guys," Reed is the first to recover from the fit of laughter. "I think we have the food problem sorted out." He gestures to the dead bear. "Dude," Caleb takes in the massive proportions of the dead animal. "That thing must weigh 600 pounds. Do you know how to butcher an animal?" "I do." Everyone turns to Eric in surprise. He shrugs. "My dad used to take me deer hunting as a kid. A bear can't be all that different." 450 pounds different. But Ben doesn't bother to point this out. Even if it's hard to imagine the stoner electrician knowing how to butcher a bear. Hell, it was impossible to imagine Kate resting her head on his chest, but here she is. Anything is possible. Ben makes a silent promise to himself. This will not be the first and only time he holds Kate. By some miracle, he's managed to get past both their bullshit, if only by a hair. Now that the door's been cracked open, he doesn't intend to stop until she's all his. He squeezes her one last time before releasing her. Retrieving his knife from the fireside, he turns to Eric. "Let's get to work, kid." "I'll get sticks," Reed volunteers. "This'll be like a real camping trip, only with bear instead of marshmallows." "I knew I should have packed salt." Ash forces herself into a sitting position. "Only savages eat wild bear without salt." Ben, standing over the carcass with Eric, looks up to find Kate watching him. The banter of the kids fades to a distant hum as their eyes meet. When she smiles at him, his whole body sings.
'63. Candelabras. Kate. Stomach full of bear, I lead the group away from our campsite in the dead of night. I did a tick check on everyone before we set out and removed 7 of them in total. I can already see patches of poison oak flaring up on several of us. There's a patch on my arm that itches like crazy. Each of us still wears a headlamp, the beams cutting through the dark. We lost 6 hours with our stop. Even though the group needed the rest, and it was mandatory for Ash, it was still 6 lost hours of trail time. We should have been off the trail and on the road by now, well on our way to Alvarez and Fort Ross. It's been over 20 hours since I last spoke to Alvarez. His deadline with Rosario is almost up. As I power hike down the muddy trail, I try not to let worry for my friend take over. My group is in rough shape today. Everyone is stiff and sore, myself included. The hard hours of travel combined with bad weather, not to mention a night sleeping on the ground, has left us all depleted. There won't be a lot of running today. Even if everyone weren't exhausted, sore, and cold, the trail is choked with more thistles and poison oak. Some of it grows as high as my chest. My hope is to keep everyone moving at a fast power hike. The rain has stopped, and we have cooked bear meat to keep us fueled for the journey. The ocean pounds against the coastline in a constant hum. The air smells fresh and clean. Things are looking better today than they had yesterday, even if the group is sore and exhausted. My thoughts stray to Ben. He's in the middle of the pack, keeping an eye on Ash. He's taken it upon himself to be her watchman. Caleb, too. I don't know what happened before the bear attack, but the 2 men appear to be on good terms now. My mind keeps straying to our kiss. Kisses. I do my best to ignore the equal parts of thrill and terror that thunder through me. It's my job to get my people off the Lost Coast. I can't do that if I'm mooning over Ben like a high school idiot. "Maybe we should ditch Arcata and move out here," Susan says. "At least we know there are bears to eat." She hikes behind me, her gait uneven with her swollen ankle. She seems to have found a rhythm she can maintain. The fact that she's upbeat enough to talk is a good sign. "We can live in tents," I reply. "Tree houses," Susan replies. "I'm not living on the ground where things can eat me. I can't wait to tell Gary I ate bear." We pass a primitive campground overlooking the ocean. There are a few pieces of driftwood for benches and fire rings that haven't seen a fire in months. There is no sign of people, no tents or backpacks of supplies for us to scavenge. We continue by without slowing. The next campground we see will be Usal Beach at the southern terminus of the Lost Coast. That's where we need to reach. I estimate we have 10 to 12 miles before us. If I can keep everyone moving at a brisk pace, we should be able to make the journey in 3 to 4 hours. The group falls silent as we hike, everyone focused on the job of moving. I monitor them, making sure to take regular breaks for food and water. We've been forced to fill our water bladders from the streams. The Lost Coast is remote enough that I'm not too worried about waterborne illnesses. Even so, I lament the lack of purification tablets and a proper means to boil water. 3.5 hours later, the group grinds to an abrupt halt. The sun has just started to rise, filling the Lost Coast with soft gray light. It's just enough for us to fully see the magical sight before us. We stand in awed silence as the trail opens up to reveal an ancient grove of giant redwood trees. Verdant green moss and ferns crawl across the ground and up the trunks of the most amazing trees I've ever seen. They have wide, squat trunks, each one adorned with a dozen or more crowns that pierce the sky like giant forks. The trees stand in silent witness to our presence. All we can hear is our own breathing. Not a single leaf or animal rustles. The lack of sound presses in on all sides. It feels like the gentlest, softest baby's blanket. "What is this place?" Reed asks in a hushed voice. "The Candelabra Grove." My heart lifts. In all my years of trail running, I've never seen a sight like this. In the panic and craziness of the last 24 hours, I'd forgotten all about the legendary Candelabra Grove. It's part of the reason the Lost Coast was on my bucket list. Frederico, I think, wherever you are, I hope you can see this. This is a redwood grove, but it's the only one of its kind in the world, I explain. These trees were formed by the coastal windstorms over hundreds of years. Every time a gale broke off a crown, the trunk would produce another one. Each new crown had to contort itself to find an upward path to the sun around the main trunk. The result is the massive trunks spread before us, each of them peppered with a myriad of crowns that stretch skyward. They resemble candelabras, hence the name of this place, the Candelabra Grove. In the death and madness of the apocalypse, we've found a tiny slice of magic. Standing beneath the ancient grove gives me hope. It's a reminder that not everything in the world has been rendered with rot and ruin. It's possible to live, survive, and thrive. If these trees survived the logging massacre and everything else that has come and gone over the last 500 years, we puny humans have a shot at making it too. We have a shot at turning into something beautiful. Someday.
I'll be damned.
Ben's shoulder brushes mine as he comes to stand beside me.
I've never seen anything like this.
Really? I tilt my head at him in surprise. You've been all over the world.
In the Middle East and Africa. Nothing magic out there.
His voice drops to his usual grumpy mutter.
Just assholes and sand.
Caleb, who overhears, raises an eyebrow.
Still plenty of sand and assholes around here.
Everyone laughs. I relax into the moment, taking in the rare beauty. For once, we aren't running for our lives. We aren't hungry. We aren't slinking around zombies or fighting them. Dry sky, ancient Candelabra Grove, and family. It's perfect. You know what this means, don't you? Susan's eyes are bright as she limps past me for a better look at the trees. No. What does it mean? She grins over her shoulder. The Candelabra Grove is the end of the Lost Coast. Usal Beach and campground will be right on the other side of the grove. My mouth falls open. In my wonder of the grove, my brain hadn't processed this piece of information. It only takes a moment for the shock to turn to joy.
You mean we made it? We survived?
Reed asks. You can say that as soon as we get to Usal Beach, Susan says. Don't jinx us. It means you all completed your first ultra-marathon. Pride fills me. I glance down at my watch and do a rough estimation of the miles behind us. I think it's safe to say you guys traveled roughly 33 miles in 12 hours. That includes the time we stopped to build a fire and, I throw a smile in Ben's direction, kill a bear. Eric lets out a whoop of joy. He and Reed slap high fives. They race down the trail. The rest of the group hustles after them, all of them energized by the first official finish line of our journey. This is a first ultramarathon for all of them. The trail and its ancient trees swallow my people. I'm about to run after them when I feel Ben's hand close around mine. I stay back with him. We haven't had a moment alone since our kiss over the bear carcass. It's unlikely we'll have another any time soon.
How long until Rosario's deadline?
He asks. I hold up my watch so he can see it. It reads, 23 hours and 56 minutes. Alvarez only has 4 minutes until Rosario's deadline. I didn't want to ruin their moment by telling them. They survived hell. Their accomplishment would be short-lived, unfortunately. We may have reached the end of the Lost Coast, but we still have a long way to go.
We'll get to Fort Ross.
Ben puts an arm around my shoulders.
Alvarez will manage until we get there.
I let out a long sigh and lean into his solid warmth. I know.
Alvarez has survived this long without you to babysit him. He can hang in there for another 24 hours, or however long it takes us to get there. And we just survived the Lost Coast, so quit sulking.
Ben is right. When I look up, he gives me his eye-crinkle smile.
This thing between us, he says. I'm not dropping it. Just so you know.
You're not dropping it. I raise an eyebrow at him. I think that may be the most unromantic thing anyone has ever said to me.
You know I'm not good with words.
He huffs in annoyance, rubbing a hand over his face.
I'm trying to say, I'd take a bullet for you, Kate. 1,000 times over, any day of the week. You look after all the little shitheads, but all I want to do is look after you. You know how hard you make that? For fuck's sake, look at where we are.
He jabs a finger at the trees around us, scowling.
You make it damn hard for a man who just wants to make sure you see the next sunrise. You know that?
I stare up at him, emotion making my throat tight. I think, in his own way, Ben just told me he loves me. His scowl fades as I trace a finger down the stubble lining his cheek and jaw. That was a lot better, I whisper. I'd take a bullet for you, too. His eyes warm, that smile crinkling along the edges again. He bends down and kisses me. His mouth may not be great with words, but as I stand in the circle of his arms, I realize it's definitely good at other things. He kisses me breathless, showing me just how much he cares. I've so badly wanted this closeness with him. I resolve not to fight it any more. I let the world fall away and lose myself in his kiss. There are no kids to tease us this time. It's just me and Ben in the Candelabra Grove. It's perfect. My knees are weak by the time he pulls back. I wrap my arms around his neck, wanting no space between us. He presses his forehead against mine, arms tightening around me.
I'm not dropping this. I mean it, Kate.
You'd better not, I murmur. I'm counting on you. I think I could drown in his gray eyes. The warmth in them leaves me as weak-kneed as his kiss. It's been a long time since a man has looked at me the way he does right now. Ben kisses me one last time before breaking away.
Come on, he says. Let's catch up with the little shitheads before they blunder into a pack of zombs at the campground and get themselves bit.
I bark a laugh. They know how to be careful.
Sometimes. There's a reason you fret about them all the time.
The gruffness of his voice is softened by his eye smile again. It warms me, all the way to my toes. We surge forward, running through the trees. Together. This has been Lost Coast. Undead Ultra, Book 3. By Camille Picott. Narrated by Gwendolyn Drewyor. Copyright 2019 by Camille Picott. Production copyright 2020 by Camille Picott.